Howdy! If you have a story that you'd like to hear featured on the channel, then go to mariesfield.com and send it my way. I'd love to feature it. And of course, thank you. Hello. I used to be a teacher for many years and for multiple different grades. It was my career for a good chunk of my life and I enjoyed it. I loved children and I always loved being able to teach them something new and hoped I could do at least one thing to spark something in them to challenge themselves, ask questions, and follow their passions. I would like to believe I made an impression on quite a few, but I know I wasn't everyone's favorite, and that's okay too. Of course, even though I looked for the best in all the kids that walked in my classroom, it wasn't always easy. I did have some challenging ones, but I still showed them as much patience as the next student. My story is about one of those kids. I will refer to him as John. John was a pretty troubled boy, if it wasn't obvious just from his home life. He had been held back a year, so while he watched his friends graduate, he was still sitting around in school. I knew he just had his dad around, not sure what happened with Mom. I don't want to say his dad wasn't good, but maybe more so that he just wasn't around much. There were times he had been called to the office or had to leave due to fighting, and he would have to wait for someone else to come get him because his dad was always busy. John's words, not mine. I was used to seeing John in the halls and other classes more, but due to the changes in the curriculum and the free study hour, I now had him in my classroom twice. His demeanor was like some of the other kids. He would lose focus during the lecture or do something else. He would try talking to others or even try to be disruptive, but I didn't humor it. He was treated the same as the other students. I might tell the class to keep quiet or something similar, or I may even involve him in the discussion. I never did it in a way to try and call him out specifically to embarrass or punish him, but if someone else asked a question, I may tie it into a previous discussion and ask someone else their opinion or take, including him. His answer started as just an, I don't know, or agreed with the previous person, and then he started giving some wise Alec answers. To those, I would just keep going with it. I was an English and debate major. I could clap back, if you will. The class found it amusing, and quite frankly, I could tell it was getting to him too. Whether it was a bad thing or a good thing, I'll probably never know. Over time, I felt like I was really breaking down some barriers with him, but he still had his bad days, such as everyone else. I think we pretty much had some unspoken rules between us, and even my classroom that everyone was aware of, which helped in cementing the idea that they were responsible for their own actions, their work, and time management. I bring this up because there were a few occasions where John was having a bad day and was obviously in a bad mood because of something that happened. I've told them that they are allowed to have bad days, but my classroom was to be used as a safe room. Do not start or plan fights in my room, do not take it out on me or other classmates, and to respect the property in the room, i.e., don't punch my bookshelves, kick other people's backpacks, etc. In fact, it may sound silly for high school students, but I had a small desk that sat next to mine in the back of the room so that no one could look at you as a safe place. I had books, exercise sheets to help you keep calm, coloring sheets, and blank paper, tissues, all kinds of things for the kids. They were allowed to go over there anytime they needed their own space. There was even a sign they could use indicating they wanted to be left alone or wanted someone to talk to. I had a lot of kids, even ones that didn't have me as a teacher, that used it. I wanted a place that they could go that wasn't just wandering the hall, skipping class, and getting into trouble. To my surprise, John had just had an argument with another teacher. It was just words, and he made his way to my classroom. His fists were clenched. I watched as he walked in the classroom, and he paced like he was about to throw a punch. However, he took a deep breath and actually went and sat at the desk with his arms crossed, tapping his foot. He had the do not disturb sign up, but hey, I thought this was an incredible improvement. He stayed like that most of the hour, other than writing something, but he then took the paper with him. Anyways, this was how he started behaving in my classroom. I found him paying more attention, participating in discussion, and when he wanted to be left alone, he sat at the desk. He even greeted me and would say goodbye for the day. But there was one day that was entirely different. I saw him while he was at lunch, where he looked angry and again got into a shouting match with another student. They were pretty close in each other's faces, and I feared a fight was about to start. Now, I'm a pretty small woman, so there was no way I was going to be able to stop anyone, but I did approach and try to de-escalate. Another male teacher did notice, and he stepped in as well, which broke the two up. I didn't see John again until his class with me. He walked in, very angry, and immediately went to the back desk and sat there tapping the table. We continued with class as normal, but at some point during the lecture, John abruptly stood up, causing the chair to make that loud screech, and stormed out of the room. I got a bad feeling, so I excused myself and tried following him out of the room. I saw him heading towards the front of the building and called out for him, but he didn't even turn around. I went back to my room and called the security desk to let them know, and they told me they would walk around for him. I finished that class and the rest of the day, actually, with no information on where he went, and no one else had seen him either. It wasn't until the next day that I got some information. The day started as normal, but my class with John wouldn't be until after lunch. I didn't see him anywhere in the halls, and no one else I knew that he associated with had seen him either. Then, right before lunch, I received a call on my desk phone during class. When I answered, it was the security officer asking me if I was okay. I kind of laughed because obviously I was, and asked why. He told me he would explain soon, but asked to lock the classroom and to not let the students leave either, even if the bell rang, until he arrived. I was a bit concerned and curious, but I agreed and hung up the phone. It was about midway through the hour, so the students were just working at their desks at this point, and I was left to think about this call at my desk. I had a horrible feeling in my gut that this had something to do with John. The security officer made it to my room and said the kids would be free to go to their next classes at that point. He then asked to speak to me since it was my lunch hour, and I agreed. He told me that they had found someone walking around the back of the school, but they were wearing a hoodie so they couldn't see their face. When they went to stop him, he tried to run but didn't get very far as they had already called the cops. It was John. They brought him into the principal's office, called his dad, and were questioning him why he was there and not in class. The more alarming part was that they found an airsoft gun in his backpack, as well as a knife and a folded up piece of paper in his pocket. That paper had a list of names on it. My name was on that list, but it was the only one with a question mark next to it, then crossed out. They were worried that something happened, causing me to be marked off, which is why they called me first. Everyone else on that list, including a teacher, were people that he did not get along with in some way. I was shocked and heartbroken. He obviously struggled with some inner demons, and I honestly felt that because I challenged him, or maybe stood up to him, I was added to that list. But I think he realized that I didn't challenge him in the way he would normally expect. I challenged him because I saw through the bullying. Or maybe I'm completely wrong in that thought, but something had to have changed his mind. I never learned what that could be, as he was expelled for the rest of the year. I fought to at least be able to let him finish the year, as he was almost done, but the school board wouldn't allow it. They didn't inform us teachers of this prior, but they said it was because he had been kicked out of previous schools for similar outbursts, but not like what we experienced. I never heard about John or what happened to him after that, but I also never saw or heard anything in the news, so I guess that's important. All I know is that I am now a very strong advocate for mental health. I was before, but this whole event with John really made me see that there are people out there suffering through things that are hard for others to imagine. If you know someone that is struggling, please reach out to them. It could honestly save a life. I have a fairly short story from when I was a teacher's assistant at an elementary school. I was working my way to trying to be a teacher, but this was actually the event that made me rethink whether or not this was the career path I wanted to take. The class that I was an assistant to was a second grade class, meaning the kids were around 7 years old. I genuinely loved the class, and I worked under one of the nicest old ladies, Mrs. Matthews. She was a very smart lady, but she was also pretty old-fashioned, and she kind of had this mentality of just let the kids be kids, and I think that may have been one of the reasons that this situation escalated to where it did. I'm not going to give all the details of everything that happened, but I will include the most important ones that really showed the situation escalating. In this class, there were a bunch of really sweet and innocent kids, and then there was one girl that we're going to call Mary, obviously not her real name. Mary was a very quiet child, and at the beginning, she seemed like she was just shy. I tried my best to talk with her and try to get her to open up, but she was very shut off and reclusive to both myself and Mrs. Matthews. She would start to talk to us about things, but would then just suddenly stop and be quiet. The first thing that happened with Mary was a simple argument between her and a boy in the class. It was during an indoor recess. We had to stay inside because it was downpouring outside. The kids were playing various games in the classroom. Some of them were drawing at their desk and such. Mary and a boy were in the corner playing one of the card games that the teacher had, and I could hear her getting angry at him over something. He said something. She responded by getting louder with him, and after a few moments, she stood up and shouted at him. It's not that she shouted that was the scary part. It's what she shouted. She stood up and screamed, "I'm going to effing cut your penis off," but in much less friendly words. Words that a 7-year-old shouldn't know or be saying. I pulled her out of the classroom and spoke with her about her words, and there was some minor punishment, but we ended up sending a note home with her to her parents explaining the situation. After this, she went back to being just kind of the quiet kid in class, and it seemed like a one-off incident, until about 3 weeks later. The kids were in gym class, which was taught by another teacher. During this class, myself and Mrs. Matthews were back in the classroom doing grading on some of the papers. About 10 minutes in, Mrs. Matthews got a call on her desk phone, and as soon as she answered it, the look on her face went from happy to upset and she hung up saying that we needed to head down to get the class. Come to find out, Mary had bitten another kid during a game of dodgeball. She got hit with the ball and had seemingly out of nowhere ran up to the kid that threw the ball and bit her shoulder really hard. Thankfully, she wasn't bleeding, but she was in pain and the bite mark was pretty deep. We ended up pulling Mary back to the classroom and talking with her about the whole thing. We asked her why she attacked another student, and she said with literally no emotion, "I don't like her. She's too cute, and I wanted her to feel pain." Obviously, this is a problem and was something that we had to address with her parents. We ended up calling her grandmother because we couldn't get a hold of her listed parents. She came up and asked us what happened, and we explained the whole situation to her. She seemed to not really care about it and tried to explain that Mary had some problems. When I tried to ask about her issues and kind of implied that they were behavioral issues that should potentially be checked out by a psychiatrist, Mrs. Matthews actually cut me off and told me that that was a situation that the family should deal with and that I was out of line saying anything about it. After that, I shut down and stopped talking for the rest of the meeting. Mary was suspended for a couple of days, but she was back in class the next week, and it was pretty clear that the other kids were scared of her, but also, being kids, they were making fun of her for the situation. Of course, this led to escalation, and it was pretty quick. It was about 3 or so days after she had come back. The teacher had done some reorganizing of students, and after everyone sat down, the girl that was now sitting next to Mary raised her hand. When she was called on, she immediately asked Mrs. Matthews if she could move away from Mary because she didn't want to be bit. Some of the other kids laughed at the comment, and I could see that Mary was getting red. I made an immediate statement that her question was inappropriate and that she needed to apologize, but as soon as I started talking, I sat there and watched Mary grab a pencil off her desk and stab it into the girl's arm. When I say stab, I literally mean stab. The pencil went into her arm. She started screaming in pain, and Mary just sat there smiling at this girl while she was bleeding on the desk, and the rest of the class went into full chaos. Mrs. Matthews called down to the principals, and they ended up calling 911 for the girl, while I tried to stop it from bleeding and keep the kids calm. This whole thing was a huge disaster, obviously. After the whole situation was taken care of and parents were contacted, I asked to speak to the principal alone. I wanted to talk to him about Mary and her issues to see what could be done for her. Come to find out, except the one incident where she was suspended for 2 days, nothing else had ever been mentioned to the principal, and he thought that was an isolated and random incident. I told him about how I had mentioned that she had behavioral issues and was shut down, and he said that shouldn't have happened, but that was pretty much it. Mary ended up being removed from the school, and there was a whole thing where the school tried to push non-violent resolutions to the kids. Great idea, implemented way too late. I seriously hate that no one had tried to do anything to help Mary, and that she went the wrong way, and I really do think it had something to do with her home life, but I have no way to prove that. In the end, I put in my resignation and left the district, and it really did make me want to not work in education. I really hope that Mary found help, that someone took the time to listen to her, to figure out what her issues were, and did everything they could to assist her. She seemed like such a sweet girl, but something was definitely wrong with her. Right before I was to start my first year of middle school, I learned that we were going to be moving. However, our move would take me out of the school district as I was always in, and since it was too far of a drive for my parents, that meant I would be going to a new school. I was already nervous about going to a new and bigger school, but now I was going to be going through it without my friends or familiar faces at all. So once we got enrolled and all our school supplies together, we went to the Meet the Teachers conference that they do. It was just me and my mom that went, as my dad stayed home with my other two siblings, so my mom asked a lot of questions and talked. A lot. That did help some, as a lot of the teachers I met seemed really cool. I was going to be taking 2 chosen elective classes, which were a shop class and a home ec class. The shop class I was really looking forward to because it was woodworking, which is what I wanted to do in the other school. Home ec was basically cooking and sewing, which I wasn't huge on the sewing side, but this school didn't have a swim class like the other one, and at least we could eat the food we cooked, right? Anyways, we met the teachers, found my classrooms and locker, so I could map out my path and not be late, hopefully. So the first day was all right. I remember struggling going to a few classes for a bit, but I wasn't late, thankfully. The woodworks teacher was really cool. He was definitely the type to try and fit in with the kids too, but didn't overdo it, thankfully. The home ec and English teacher seemed pretty strict, which sucked, but it was whatever. They just didn't care for it when we screwed around in class or got off topic, but otherwise, they were tolerable. The one I seemed to have the most issues with, though, was Mr. Stevens. And it's hard to say I had issues with him because it more so seemed like he had a problem with me. I know that's usually a cop-out when a kid has issues in a class, but I never had issues in classes before. Even in math, which I struggled in at times, I pushed myself to make sure I got at least a high C. However, Mr. Stevens taught social studies, which I never really had a problem in, so that only compounded the issue. I remember on the first day specifically, he was optimistic and smiling while he introduced himself, and the rest of us did. We went through some normal questions like birthday, siblings, favorite subject, favorite food, simple things like that. He pointed out someone when he remembered having their sibling in class and basically teased that he hoped they behaved better or related to the others when certain subjects were mentioned. Then it was my turn. I introduced myself by my first and last name, and he interjected by lightly teasing me, asking, "Oh, you're the kid with the mom that talked a lot, huh?" This, of course, made the others chuckle. He then made a joke about how he felt he was the student being put on the spot with all of her questions, but then made light of the situation, saying he hoped we asked as many questions as her, though, so we would all pass easily. So, at first, he really did seem fine and even encouraging to the class, but that wouldn't last long. It seemed like small things at first, where he started seeming really uptight about the littlest things. If I turned in a paper and the header was on the left instead of the right, or if I left something off by mistake, he would give it back to me saying it wasn't finished or something, and I would stare at it confused until I figured it out on my own. With the friends I met, I would just talk about it and we all just laughed and joked that, great, we have a really OCD teacher, fine. So I paid more attention to make sure I didn't mess up the simple stuff like that. But then it seemed like he would find more reasons to give me bad marks. On the assignments that had like essay answers, he always seemed to mark mine as being missed, and his reasons would be anything from not enough information to being completely wrong. So I really struggled with those questions, which only made my grades slip more. Then it became more psychological for me. I would take a lot of notes as is, but I found myself doing it more in his class to make sure I covered everything I needed. While I would be writing, he would call on me to answer a question on the spot. When I didn't immediately have an answer, or if I got it wrong, he would make a comment to the rest of the class saying not to end up like me. He was always making comments like this, or would throw a pen or something at me, and it would just be embarrassing. But if he happened to call on someone else and they got it wrong, it was always, "No, but good guess," or he would just move on. But I was always the joke of the class. I even brought it up to some of my friends, and they thought it was weird too, but none of us could really ever pinpoint why I was targeted so hard. Then I got really pissed off at one of the assignments I did. Because my grade had dipped a bit in this class, he had included a part at the end of this packet for extra credit. It was basically over the next chapter that we would be going over in the textbook, so I thought might as well answer a few questions right from the book and hopefully bump my grade up a bit. Negative. It was like he set it up for me to fail. There were like 5 fill-in questions, and I got them all wrong. But the problem I had with it was, once again, he seemed to be very picky. Like, the answer was the Great Depression, and I answered it as Great Depression. I brought this up to my friends, and one of them confirmed this as they had put the Depression and got it right. So we wanted to test his theory, and we devised a plan. The next assignment we did it together and put the same answers word for word, punctuation the same, everything. We even turned it in on the same day. Literally, the only difference was my name and my handwriting. As you would guess, he got a great grade on it, whereas the fill-ins, I managed to get a lot of them wrong, or half points, something like that. At this point, and with my friend's recommendation, I brought it up to the school counselor. I explained to them that I felt like I was being targeted, and after I explained everything, she asked me which teacher it was. I thought maybe we were getting somewhere, until she started basically explaining how sometimes students may feel that way when they see their friends succeeding and we're not, and suggested I ask for opportunities to bring my grade up. So again, making it seem like it was all my fault. I was at a loss on what to do from here, because if I couldn't get a counselor to see what was happening, someone that's supposed to be there for the kids, then who would believe me? So I struggled to keep my grade up, all the while stressing out and slowly shutting myself in. However, when we finished the first semester and our parents got to see our grades, my parents noticed the D pretty quickly and confronted me about it. I couldn't make excuses because my parents always saw right through them, and I remember breaking down and crying, telling them what had been happening. I told them how I felt like I did something wrong, and that's when my mom seemed to have something click for her. She asked me which teacher it was, and when I told her, she said she would try talking to them and to keep doing as I normally do until then. That didn't seem to go over too well because shortly after, I was pulled from that school. They enrolled me back into the other school and figured out a way to get me there. At the time, my mom told me that she agreed that she thought he was singling me out and got nowhere with the principal, so she didn't want me to go through that kind of environment. It was nice seeing my old friends again and going over things I was already learning. Swim class was full, unfortunately, so I still got stuck with home ec. However, they did the sewing stuff first semester, so I got to take the cooking stuff twice. That's not where it ended, though. When I was in high school, one of my friends from the other school contacted me and asked me if I had heard about Mr. Stevens. Turns out, a few female students came forward with claims that he offered to help them with their grade if they did something for him. You can fill in the blanks there. Of course, the coward that he is, he just retired early, that year actually, and nothing ever came of the accusations as far as I ever knew. I told my parents about this, and to my surprise, they were not. That's when my mom explained more as to why she pulled me from that school. On the day of the Meet the Teachers, he was hitting on my mom. Quite obviously, too, and when she said she was happily married, he seemed to try and avoid her or dismiss any further questions she had. Then, when she went to have a meeting with him after school one day, he basically suggested she do something for him to help me with my grades, making suggestive motions to her. She again quickly brought this up to the principal and counselors, to which they said they had never had any complaints about Mr. Stevens before, and they didn't believe her. So my mom, not feeling safe in this situation, pulled me out and made formal complaints to the school boards. She only ever got responses back about, "We'll look into this," and that was it. If it wasn't for the privacy of my family due to my father's job, I would call the school out in a heartbeat, but just know, Mr. Stevens, let's hope we never meet again. And by the way, I got an A in my social studies class. Well, hello there, my friends. That was a collection of scary school stories. I almost forgot what it was for a minute. And hi, nice to have you here again. Sorry it's been a while. How's everybody been? I needed to do another video. Still sound a little funky, but that's just me, and maybe that's just how I feel, but I definitely feel like I sound weird. I have to talk all day for work, so kind of have to take it slow and do what I can, since that comes first, unfortunately. But I'm here now, and we've got a new video, so we're making progress. We're good. We're good. So how are you? Again, I already said that. Doesn't matter. How are you? It's gotten a lot cooler here, which is nice. I like that. Pumpkin spice is out. That's also a good thing. We went and saw the new Alien movie. Also very good. I would definitely recommend it. I hadn't seen the other Alien movies before, so with nothing more to do when you're, in quarantine and feeling awful because of COVID, we watched the other 6 movies because we hadn't seen them before. So we did that, and then we went to see the Alien movie, and it was good. If you haven't seen them, I would definitely suggest that. Good choice. Yeah, I think that's about it so far on this end. So yeah. And if you did enjoy this video, please do give it a like below, and if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. You can also submit stories directly at my website at mariesfield.com. Had to slow down there a bit before I stumbled. And lastly, don't forget to leave a comment on your thoughts on the video. I already said a million times at the beginning what you've got going on, so I'm going to say it again. Sorry I'm obnoxious right now. I'm kind of tired, so maybe I should just stop and go to bed. Yeah. And with that being said, friends, I hope you have a fantastic week and a great rest of your day. And until next time, take care.